How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're sending Daf Ayin Aleph, Daf 71 of meshicha Avodah Zarah, friends. All right, friends. Here's the deal with meshicha, with Daf Ayin Aleph and meshicha Avodah Zarah. It's mamish gevaldik. Mamish gevaldik. Some great stuff on Daf Ayin Aleph of meshicha Avodah Zarah. The Daf starts off. I have no voice. I wouldn't say I have no voice, but my voice seems to be compromised, I'd say, to some extent. But all right, the air conditioner is also compromised to some extent. Oh gosh, it's Erev Shabbos. I'm gonna have to have somebody come check it out. Maybe on Sunday. We'll see what happens over Shabbos. Al Kuponim, it's all right. Now, where are we? So today's Daf 71 of meshicha Avodah Zarah. When the troops come to town, Azoy. What happens when the troops come to town? And of course, what's the nafkaminas for yayn nesech? Of course, that's our topic. That's what we want to know about. Givaldik. Next, swapping yayn nesech, payment for cash. Oh, I spelled cash wrong. Oops. Sorry. I guess I still have some computer programming. Right. I spelled it Cashe. No, I spelled it Cache. Which is a different kind of cash. Akoponim. Wait, let me just switch that quick. Okay. Oops. No, there's no E at the end. Oh, they have to change it everywhere. Okay, forget it. I'm going to just have to do that later. Anyways, swapping yayn nesech, payment for cash. Who could tell me what that means? It's a very interesting scenario. It's interesting. On its own, isolated, it's not like that interesting necessarily, but because we've learned other sugyas, it becomes somewhat interesting. But it's talking about where people did work, Yidden did work. And when it comes time to get paid, they get paid with yayn nesech. So they say, we don't want to get paid with yayn nesech, we'd rather take cash. So we're going to talk about that. It's kind of saying, instead of giving me yayn nesech, can you give me cash instead? Is that considered like you're basically getting the value of the yayn nesech? And then really the lion's share, the main sugya of today's daf is Kinyan meshicha for an ovayd kokhavim. That's going to be a big machlok, is a big discussion, and it's going to be really gewaldig. So Chaver, this is what's on the agenda for today, for Daf Ayin Aleph, for Daf 71 of meshicha Avodah Zarah. Here we do. All right, here we go. We are going to start on Daf Ayin Amid Beis. 4 lines from the bottom. Chavi, you ready? Here we go. Aha. So, troops that come to town. And Tosfos points out, I mentioned this Tosfos yesterday already. Tosfos points out, so because my voice is shtickle compromised, here's what we got to do. I need to babble today, not from my throat, but from my heart. Because my throat, my voice, is shtickle shvach today, but my heart is ala kefak, is gewaldig. So today, mamish, it's going to be all heart. How does that sound to you, Cheve? We're going for 100% heart today. As the Torah, as the Gemara says, where is this Gemara? Rachmana liba boy. Where is that Gemara? Rachmana liba boy. Oh, sheesh, I'd have to think about that one. Rachmana liba boy. Akoponim cheve. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants the heart. We're going to give. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants heart. We're going to give heart. So says the so yesterday Tosfos, I already mentioned Tosfos yesterday, because yesterday we had this pulmusa. Yesterday we had this pulmusa, and the pulmusa we said was troops that came to town, but that was more to like collect taxes and things like that. But this is like soldiers, like real soldiers, tough guys. So fighting wars. So the soldiers, they come to town b'shashulim. If it's a time of peace, so then chavius psuchis asuris, the open barrels are asuris, because if you have an open barrel, there were troops in town. They were probably enjoying themselves and yayn neseching all this stuff. Stumis mutaris, but if the barrels are closed, they're permitted Because if they're closed, then they didn't get into them. Bishas milchome, but if it's a time of war, they don't have time to be yayn neseching. Elu va'elu mutaris v'shem pnai l'nasech. But if it's at a time of war, the priority is not neseching. And therefore, whatever barrels there are, open, closed, there was no nesech that happened. They got too much other things on their mind while they are warring. Says the Gemara, Viramini. But we have a contradiction. Who could tell me what that is? When you have a city that's besieged, all of the Ashes Kohanims that are in the city are psulis. Of course, we know that an Ashes Kohen, the wife of a Kohen, if she has been with somebody other than her husband, even if it's forced and against her will, even if it's ones, unfortunately they can't remain married. And therefore, what we have a brayso that says that if you have a city that was besieged, and I imagine the troops, the soldiers got into the city. So then we assume that all of the Ashes Kohanim can no longer remain married to their husbands. So on the one hand, in our Mishnah, we said if it's b'shas milchama, they have too much going on in their mind, they're not doing anything. On the other hand, we have a brayso that says b'shas milchama, all of the women are basically assumed to be violated. So it says of Mario, look, they have priorities. But Mari says, look, they have priorities. They don't have so much time or what else? Whatever it is. They're interested in having beer. They're not interested in neseching. Okay? And therefore, unfortunately, that means that we assume that they violated women. We don't assume that they neseched up some wine. And now we get up to the second part of today's daf, swapping yayn nesech payment for cash. Here we go. Zok the Mishnah. I'm going to read what that goes. The way that goes, the Bach works. It's just writes. It's just the first two words it affects. Umanin Yisrael sheshalach lem ovayd kokhavim chavis shel yayn nesech b'schar. You hear this? So you have Yidden are workers. They're working, and it comes time to get paid. Comes payment time, and the ovayd kokhavim gives them yayn nesech. Again, he pays them with yayn nesech. He says, here, thanks for working for me. Here, take this yayn nesech. They could say to him, hey, can you give us its value? We want the cash. We don't want the yayn nesech. We want its value. I.e., we want cash instead. So so that's permitted. They could say to him, give us its value. However, once the barrel goes into their rishus and they're koneh it and it's theirs, well then it would be too late, because then they're basically swapping their own yayn. Well, it's their yayn nesech, and they can't get the value of that. But prior to that, they could say that we want its value, which is interesting. So Rashi says on this, what does Rashi say in the Mishnah? Because they haven't been koneh yet, and he owes them money, not wine. Yisrael shenoishu b'ovayd kokhavim mana mocher avodas kokhavim beivilo yenesech v'lo muter. So we had said, and Daf Samech Dalet, that if a yid is owed money, he lent 100 zuzis to ovayd kokhavim. The ovayd kokhavim says, "Here, take this Avodah Zarah." No, sorry, it's not what he says. So the yid is owed 100 zuzis, and the ovayd kokhavim sells his Avodah Zarah and takes the money that he received from the sale and uses that to pay back the yid. And we said that that's okay. That it's okay to use the money that was swapped. So Rashi says here also, they were getting paid with the yayn nesech, and they said we want the value instead. So he, I guess, swapped the barrel for the yayn nesech for money, and that's okay. It's interesting because I was wondering. That's interesting. I think maybe now I understand Rashi. I'll tell you, Cheb, this kasha was bothering me for a long time. This isn't my first time learning this daf, Cheb, as you know. It's my third time learning this daf. I learned it already with Rashi. I learned it with Tosfos. Now I'm learning it with you. And this question was bothering me. I think maybe I get it now. That's the value of Shavas Achim. That's the value of learning together with the great Chevra here at Babylon Talmud. We make each other smarter and help each other understand the Gemara. See, because I was wondering, Chevra, that same Gemara that Rashi just quoted, that said that if a Yid lends 100 zuzas to ovayd kokhavim, and the ovayd kokhavim sells Avodah Zarah in order to pay back the Yid, we said that money is okay. Right, the shaila was over there. If ovayd kokhavim sells Avodah Zarah, that money isn't mutter also. So we say, yeah, it's mutter. But the Brisa also said that if the ovayd kokhavim says, okay, look, all I have is Avodah Zarah, let me go and sell it so I can pay you back. We said that's a problem because Rotze b'kiyuma, because now the Yid wants the Avodah Zarah to exist, so that it can be sold and that money can be gotten for it so it can get paid back. We said that's a problem of Rotze b'kiyuma. So I was wondering, shouldn't we say the same thing here? That when the ovayd kokhavim comes to pay with the wine barrel, and they say, wait, we don't want the wine barrel, can you give us money instead? So why is that allowed? Because now they Rotze b'kiyuma. They want the wine to exist so that he could sell and they can get paid back. But now, as I'm learning it together, Zazaman, I'm thinking, no, what they said was we don't want the wine, we want its money instead. I don't know that he doesn't necessarily have money. You see, that's the difference. In the case where we said it's an issue of Rotze b'kiyuma, he didn't have money, all he had was the wine, and he had to now go sell the wine in order to pay him back. Now the Yid is not Rotze b'kiyuma, he wants the wine to exist so he can get paid back. Here it could be that maybe the employer did have money. I don't know why. For whatever reason, he paid them with wine. They said, wait, we don't want the wine. Can you give us cash instead? And he says, sure, here's cash. So then there's no issue of Rotze b'kiyuma. And in terms of, the value of yayn nesech, right, but then again, I mean, why is Rashi quoting that, right, that Gemara of selling, if he's not actually selling here? But here, is he necessary? I don't know. Right? Where are we? So, give us its value instead. The value of yeah, but I guess if it's right, but we also said that once it goes into their rishos, it's a problem. So, Kilu, the point is maybe that once it's in their rishos, it's theirs. Once it's theirs, then they can't get the value, the exchange of the yayn nesech. But when it's not theirs and it's his, and they said, Tein lanu domel, give us its value, and he's therefore swapping it, even if he has the money, but they ask for the value of the yayn nesech, which if they owned it would be a problem. But if it's all happening in the domain of the ovayd kokhavim before it entered their domain, so then it would be okay. Maybe that's the point. So maybe it's not. So maybe to sum up, I don't know, I haven't seen this anywhere. But maybe to sum up, what's happening is they're saying, hey, we don't want the yayn nesech, we want money instead. And it could be he has the money. But they say, what do they say? They say, Tein lanu es dameha, give us its value. So even though he's giving them the value of the yayn nesech, it's okay as long as the ovayd kokhavim is the one doing it, as we saw on Daf Samach Daled, that when an ovayd kokhavim sells Avodah Zarah to get money, right? So to get the value of the Avodah Zarah to pay the Yid, that's okay. So it could be that this is what's happening here as well. But it isn't necessarily an issue of Rotze b'kiyuma, because he's not necessarily going out and selling it. It could be that he has the money, but they're saying, give us the value of the wine. So he says, okay, sure, here. And we're saying that's okay. Chevy, did you follow that? It's very detailed. I don't know, but I hope it's real. I hope it's shayr. I hope it was good. Says the Gemara, Omer of Yehuda Machov, it's permitted for a fellow to say to Ovayd kokhavim, Menasa Melech, can you go and pay the Menasa Melech for me? It was some kind of a tax of sorts, and it can be paid. Yeah, I think it's paid for all sorts of commodities and stuff. What does Rashi say? Arnona, so he knows some mitzvah from their wheat, and from their money, from their animals, maybe also from their wine or something. And Yid says to Ovayd kokhavim, hey, can you pay it for me, and I'll pay you back. And then the Ovayd kokhavim goes and he pays the tax for the Yid, but he pays it with yayn nesech. So now what happens is the Ovayd kokhavim paid for the yayn nesech, and now because Ovayd kokhavim paid for the Yid with yayn nesech, he's basically paying back the value of yayn nesech. So he's now paying the value of the yayn nesech. But we say that that's okay. We say that is okay. But again, so basically it sounds like, meaning, on the one hand you could say it's basically paying the tax with ovayd with yayn nesech. Right? He's basically paying with yayn nesech, which would be a problem. But we're saying, a person can say to Ovayd kokhavim, can you pay them this tax for me, and I'll pay you back. And then the Ovayd kokhavim pays with the yayn nesech, and now the Yid is paying back to Ovayd kokhavim for having paid with the yayn nesech. So it's like he's kind of benefiting from yayn nesech. He's paying with the yayn nesech, which he can't do. But we're saying that that's okay. Maybe we have a contradiction. A person cannot say to Ovayd kokhavim, ul tachtoi le'otzer. Can you go in my stead to the otzer? And Rashi says, what's the otzer? The shoter, some kind of officer. So can you go in my stead and pay the officer? And then and this person goes and pays the officer with yayn nesech. So we're saying in that case it's taka osur. Al yomer adam l'chaver ul tachtoi le'otzer, go in my stead. Al yomer, you shouldn't say that. Omerlei. Rav responded to whoever was asking this question, you're asking me a question from go in my stead. Of course, go in my stead is going to be usher. But this example, right, my example says Rav of Mutaladim Lomer Lovekom Tseva Apes Olam Nasa Melech. But Rav's example, Lodami Eloha, is more similar to the Seifa of that same verse that you quoted me. Aval Omelo Malteini Min also, but he could say, "Can you save me from the shoter?" So what just happened? There were like three small little sections that we just had. Rav said, "No, what did Rav say?" Rav says, "Mutaladim Lomer Lovekom Tseva Apes Olam Nasa Melech." It's mutter for a person to say, can you go and pay the tax for me and I'll pay you back? And he goes and pays the tax with yayn nesech and you can pay him back. That's fine. Now we asked a kasha from a brisa. Now this brisa has two parts. The question came from the first part of the brisa, which is that a person is not allowed to say, ol tachtei le'otzer, go in my stead to the officer to pay the officer whatever needs to be paid. And then that person goes and pays with yayn nesech. That would be a problem. So we're saying you can't do that. So why, Rav, are you saying that you're allowed to say, can you pay the tax for me and I'll pay you back? And he pays with the nesech. Why is that okay? After all, we're saying when he says go in my place to the shoter and he pays with the nesech, it's a problem. To which Rav says, yeah, but if you look at the second part of that price, it says, but he is allowed to say, save me from the officer. What's the difference, Chevra? What's the difference? The difference is when he says go, the scenario where it was forbidden was when he says go in my place. When he says ul tachta, I go in my stead to the officer. Well, then he's his shaliach. He's making the ovayd kokhavim his shaliach. And when the ovayd kokhavim pays with the nesech, he's paying with the nesech as the yid, and the yid can't pay with the nesech. That's why it's a problem. But to say, can you pay for me and I'll pay you back? And honestly, the Yid would be perfectly happy, maybe even prefer, if the ovayd kokhavim paid with cash and he pays him back cash. But the ovayd kokhavim chose instead to pay with the nesech. Okay, it's up to him, whatever he wants. But the Yid is now just paying back the kokhavim for having covered him, but it's not like the it's not like the ovayd. It's not like the yid was paying the tax with yayn nesech. The ovayd kochav, he would have been perfectly happy if the ovayd kochav paid with cash. Happened to be the ovayd kochav chose to pay with yayn nesech, but the point is that the yid is paying back the ovayd kochavim for having covered him, but not specifically for yayn nesech. That was a technicality. But if he says go in my stead as my shaliach, then it becomes a problem. And now we get up to the third part of today's daf, Givaldik. The third mishnah, and the third part of today's daf. It's mamish Givaldik. It's mamish Givaldik. It's gonna be stark. It's a little challenging, but it's gonna be good. Kinyan meshicha for an ovayd kokhavim. Wow. Mesech Bab Metzia, Perek Hazov, Kinyanim. So we learned, of course, all about Kinyanim of Yidden. How exactly does the Kinyan work? Kinyan Kesef, Kinyan Meshicha, Mamish, Perek Hazov, Mesech Bab Metzia. Here we go. Says the Mishnah, yayn kokhavim. So a yid who is selling wine to an ovayd kokhavim. Pasak ad she loy madad dam of mutarim. Madad ad she lo pasak dam of asurin. Sheesh. So I think if there's going to be differences throughout the daf about exactly what this measuring thing is, but okay. So a yid is selling wine to an ovayd kokhavim. So if they had already agreed on a price, and now the ovayd kokhavim, so they already agreed on the price, now the ovayd kokhavim picks up the barrel of the wine or whatever, and pours it into a different vessel so you can kind of measure out how much wine we're talking about, and they can kind of agree on and like make a sale and everything. So they already agreed on the price, and then the ovayd kokhavim picks up the barrel or the container. So let's just assume for now it's a kinyan meshicha, and he's kona the wine. So double mutar. It's acceptable for the yid to receive payment for the wine. Meaning, what happened? A yid is selling wine to an ovayd kokhavim. They agree on a price. There's nobody paid anything yet, but they agreed on a price. The ovayd kokhavim then picks up the barrel. Let's just say he's kona kinyan meshicha. He picks it up. Hagbaya meshicha. I think it's the same thing. So he picks it up and he's kona the wine. He pours it into vessels, measures it out. At that point, it's already his. And even if he touches the wine at this point, makes it yayn nesech, and he hasn't yet paid the yid. And now he says, okay, great, this is all gevaldi. At this point, the wine's already been made yayn nesech, and he takes out his wallet and he pays the yid for the wine. Is that a problem or not? Now the yid is being paid for the wine, but the wine at this point is yayn nesech. So we said that if they had already agreed upon the price prior to the ovayd kokhavim picking it up, so then when the ovayd kokhavim picks up the wine, he's kona it, it's his. Which means that when he made yayn nesech, he made his own wine yayn nesech. And at the point that the ovayd kokhavim picked up the wine and was kona it was not yet yayn nesech. And once he was kona it, he now owes the money that they agreed upon to the yid. So what the yid is being paid for is the wine that the ovayd kokhavim was kona it. Once he's kona it, he can do whatever he wants with it. He made it yayn nesech, great. But at the time that he was kona it was not yayn nesech. And then when the ovayd kokhavim pays the yid, what he's paying for is the wine that he was kona, which was not yayn nesech, and therefore the yid can accept payment for it. However, if they hadn't agreed upon a price, and then the yid and the ovayd kokhavim picked up the wine and was kona, so picked up the wine, he's not kona b'meshicha. The Gemara is going to talk about it. But I feel like this must have come up. But he's not, because they hadn't yet agreed on the price. He's not actually calling it because he doesn't know what the Yid can come up with a crazy number later on. So since they hadn't yet agreed on a price, when the ovayd kokhavim picks it up, he's not calling it. It doesn't belong to him. When he touches it, it becomes a nesech. It still belongs to the Yid. So ultimately, when the Yid receives payment, he's going to be receiving payment for yayn nesech because it was still his. It was still the Yid's when it became yayn nesech. And that's going to be a problem. So let's read it inside, friends. My Yid sells his wine to the ovayd kokhavim. Pasak ad shaloi madad. If they agreed upon a price before the ovayd kokhavim picked it up and started measuring it out into vessels, but they already agreed on a price, and the ovayd kokhavim picks it up, and now he's koneh b'meshicha, and it belongs to him, even if later on he makes it into yayn nesech, but at the time that he was koneh, it was not yet yayn nesech, and at that point there was a chiyuv for him to now pay the Yid at that point when it was still not yayn nesech. The money is permitted. Because the chiyuv mammon was the chiyuv to pay was at a time when it was not yayn nesech, it was kosher wine. However, madad ad shaloi pasak, but if the ovayd kokhavim picked up the wine to measure it, and they hadn't yet agreed on a price, well then, the ovayd kokhavim is not koneh when he picks it up because they hadn't yet agreed on a price, which means that when he makes it yayn nesech, he doesn't yet own it. The Yid still owns it, and it's the Yid's yayn nesech, and dam of asurin. The money in that case are also because the Yid can't accept payment for selling yayn nesech. And now we get to the machlokes between Meimar and Rav Ashi regarding whether and ovayd kokhavim can be koneh b'meshicha. Amar Meimar says a Meimar meshicha ovayd kokhavim koneh. Says a Meimar that meshicha by an ovayd kokhavim is koneh, and kind of like we saw in our Mishnah. At least that's a simple way to understand the Mishnah. He picks up the barrel and it's koneh. So my Meimar meshicha ovayd kokhavim koneh, that ovayd kokhavim can be koneh b'meshicha. And you should know that these Persians, they send gifts to one another, and they don't renege. Once they send it, they don't renege. And we want to assume that the reason is because once the recipient receives it and picks it up, he's koneh it, and therefore the sender cannot renege. Okay, fine. Tosfos Taka says that that isn't exactly really as proof, but I don't know, maybe some kind of a support or something. But anyways. Rav Ashi Omar says, Rav Ashi lo'olam emalach, really I will say to you, and Tosfos Taka says you can get rid of the words lo'olam emalach, and the Gosa Bach, I think, also gets rid of it because Rav Ashi is actually straight up arguing on Ravina. He's not just saying, really, I'll tell you, no, he's on a Meimar. It's Taka mamish argument. So let's read it like that. So Rav Ashi Omar, meshicha ovayd kokhavim eina koneh. Rav Ashi argues, and he says, nisht. Meshicha by an ovayd kokhavim is not koneh b'meshicha. Well, then how does he make a kinyan? Kesef, when he pays. When he pays, that's when he's koneh. Not when he picks it up. And this was a machlokes from Bava Metzia, Perek Azov. How exactly does a kinyan work, right? We talked about pizza, right? A person goes and buys pizza from the pizza monger. At what point does the person buying the pizza own it? Is it when he pays for the pizza, or is it when he receives his pizza and picks it up? Everybody agrees ultimately that it's when that you're koneh b'meshicha, but midoraisa Rabbi Yochanan says actually is a kinyan kesef when you pay for it. Rish Lakish says it's when you do a kinyan meshicha. So now a Meimar says that an ovayd kokhavim is koneh b'meshicha. Rav Ashi says an ovayd kokhavim is not koneh b'meshicha. It's koneh b'kesef when he pays for it. That's when the kinyan happens by an ovayd kokhavim. So Rav Ashi Omar meshicha b'ovayd kokhavim eino koneh, but I did lo ajibu. Well, then why did the Persians not renege once they sent the gifts to their friends? Because they're too proud. They're too proud. Pasnish that I should renege on a gift once I gave it. They're too proud to renege, that's why they didn't renege, but not necessarily because the recipient was kona b'meshicha, not necessarily. And now here comes the big discussion. Here comes the big discussion. Are you ready for the big discussion? Ready or not, here it comes. Amr Rashi says, Rashi minu aminala. How do I know that an ovayd kokhavim is kona b'kesef and not b'meshicha? Mida Amrlu Rav, that Rav said, lahanu savoyosa, to these wine mongers, ki kailisu chamelev de kokhavim, when you measure wine to the ovayd kokhavim, shaklu zuze minayu, accept payment feucht, v'hoder kailenlu, and only then measure it to them. And now here, so in the Mishnah, I explained that what was happening with the wine merchants was that they would agree on a price and the ovayd kokhavim would immediately pick it up to measure it out. Here, what's happening, I think, is that the winemonger himself is the one pouring. The question is he pouring it into his own vessel? Is he pouring it into the vessel of the kokhavim? So let's assume that he's pouring it into his own vessel, and then the ovayd kokhavim will pick up the vessel of the yid and pour it then into his own vessel. But what's happening here, I believe, is that the yid is basically pouring out the wine into his own, the yid's vessel, and then the ovayd kokhavim would then pick it up from there. We're going to see the Gemara. It's a whole thing in the Gemara. But anyways, now, so again, Amar Avashi says, how do I know that ovayd kokhavim is kona b'kesef and not b'meshicha? Mida Amar Lu Rav lanu savoyo, so that Rav says to the Rav said to these Jewish winemongers, Ki chaylisu chamra lo'ovayd kokhavim, when you measure out wine to the ovayd kokhavim, shaklu zuze minayu, first receive the payment, v'hoder kailen lehu, and only afterwards measure out the wine. The ilo nikitu ba'adayu zuzen, if they don't have any money on them, ozifunu, so lend them money. Let's say the wine costs $50. Lend them $50. Give them a $50 loan, which will be paid back in a month. Now they have whenever. Now they have $50. They could do whatever they want with it. They'll use it to buy your wine, and they'll essentially give it back to you. But now, they basically took out a $50 loan to buy the wine from you, and essentially they're now going to give you back your $50. But now they took out that was a loan, and they used that $50 to buy the wine from you, and they'll have to pay you back the $50 at a later point. V'ader shkilu minayu, and then take the money back from them. They'll use that essentially to buy the wine. Geridabi. And it'll be a loan that they'll have to pay back at a later point. The ilo of these wachi, because if you don't accept payment milichatchila, nesech, when ultimately it's going to become yayn nesech, because they're going to touch it eventually. If you don't accept payment milichatchila, well, then there's not going to be a kinyan yet. And at the time that they end up touching it, if they haven't yet paid you for it, they're going to make it into yayn nesech when it's still yours. It's going to become yayn nesech in your possession. Shkiltu dmei yayn nesech koshkiltu. And therefore, if you don't receive payment first, well, then it won't belong to the ovayd kokhavim. And even though the ovayd kokhavim has it in his possession, it won't belong to him. It still belongs to you because you haven't gotten paid yet. And when he makes it into yayn nesech, it's still yours. And when he ultimately pays you, he's paying you for what he has right now that he hasn't yet been koneh, and what he's buying at that point is the wine that he's already made into yayn nesech, you're going to be receiving payment for yayn nesech. So friends, if I had to ask you, what does it sound like is going on over here, friends? You would tell me it sounds like the money is what's making the Kinyan by the ovayd kokhavim. And therefore Rav is makpid, and he says to these winemongers, make sure to receive the money first. If they don't have money, lend them money. Get that money first, because that's where the Kinyan's going to be. And by receiving the money first, the Kinyan goes down. The wine belongs to the ovayd kokhavim. When he makes it yayn nesech, it's his wine that he's making yayn nesech. You already got paid. And now, frag the Gemara, and if you're telling me that it's the meshicha that makes the Kinyan, so why is Rav getting so worked up about the payment? Who cares? And if a maimer, you're right, then ovayd kokhavim is going to be meshicha. Why is Rav getting so worked up about make sure you get paid first? Who cares? Let the yid measure out the wine into his vessel, into his own vessel. The ovayd kokhavim will not pick up that vessel. Be koneh the wine b'meshicha. He hasn't yet made it into yayn nesech. At this point, now that he's been koneh b'meshicha, he owns it. It's his. He now needs to pay you for it. He hasn't yet paid you, but he needs to pay you for it. But it's his wine. He made a kinyan on it. He now owes you money. When he later makes it to yayn nesech, he's making his own wine into yayn nesech. What he's paying you for is the wine that he was koneh, which was not yet yayn nesech. So if you say that ovayd kokhavim make a kinyan meshicha, why is Rav getting so worked up about making sure that the payment happens at the beginning? What do you think about that kasha? It's a stark kasha. To which the Gemara answers, and Chaver, you're going to have to halt cup. I'm going to have to halt cup over here. I can't guarantee, there's no guarantee that I'm not going to get confused. It's going to be back and forth. But we'll try to halt cup together. So, and for the Gemara on the second line of the final Aleph Mebez, Idka Kail Urmi Limona de Yisrael Achinami. So the Gemara answers, basically, let's say a Meimar answers, or Gemara answers for a Meimar. You could say that meshicha is koneh by an ovayd kokhavim. You could say meshicha is koneh by ovayd kokhavim. So why is Rab getting so worked up about the payment? I'll tell you why. Because in this particular case, the yid, the winemonger, was not pouring the wine into his own vessel. He was pouring the wine into the kli of the ovayd kokhavim. And therefore, when he pours the wine into the vessel of the ovayd kokhavim, immediately when it goes into the vessel, there's yayn nesech in there, or residue, whatever it might be, it becomes yayn nesech, even before the ovayd kokhavim has had a chance to make a kinyan meshicha. So you could say that there is a kinyan meshicha, just that in this particular case, the yid is pouring the wine into the vessel of the ovayd kokhavim, and it becomes yayn nesech even before the meshicha. Tosfos has a gewaldige kasha. I'm sorry, I was debating if I should. Tosfos has such a gewaldige kasha. I'd even make a Tosfos takeaway for this. I was in such a rush. It's Mama Shabbos is starting now. But Tosfos has a gewaldige kasha. If we're saying that either you're koneh b'meshicha or you're koneh b'kesef, so if we're putting in all this effort right now to say that ovayd kokhavim is koneh b'meshicha, well then what was the point of Rav even saying bichlal that you have to accept it? If the kinyan, Right? There's machlokas Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan in Perek Azav and Bava Metzia. How does a Kinyan work? Does it work with meshicha or does it work with kesef? If it works with kesef, it doesn't work with meshicha. If it works with meshicha, it doesn't work with kesef. So if we're making the argument that right now that the overcoming is koneh b'meshicha, so what was the point of Rab saying accept money first? Money doesn't work. Right? If we're saying that overcoming is koneh b'meshicha, and the only reason why he had to accept the payment was because it's being poured into the vessel of the kokhavim, and he's not doing meshicha before. But who cares? The payment's irrelevant. If an kokhavim is koneh b'meshicha, well then why are we even talking about payment? That's not how you make the kinyan. So Tosfos gives an interesting answer, which is you could say that by yidden it's either or. We have a gezeres pasuk, whatever it is, that either you're koneh b'meshicha or you're koneh b'kesef. You could say that by ovayd Zarah it could be either or. By meaning, according to Rish Lakish, you're only koneh b'meshicha, not b'kesef. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you're only koneh b'kesef, not b'meshicha. But maybe by an ovayd Zarah you could do either or. So therefore, if you could be koneh b'meshicha, so be koneh b'meshicha. If you can't be koneh b'meshicha, so be koneh b'kesef. Very interesting kash of Tosfos. I did our regular achas pretty quickly because we got a big daf over here, and whatever. But very interesting question. Let's go weiter. So we want to say right now that really an ovayd can be koneh b'meshicha, but for a technicality, it didn't work because it went into the vessel of the kokhavim, and it became yayn nesech before it even did a kinyan meshicha. But fact, the Gemara is solved. At the end of the day, kimotala avira de mana kanya. So the Gemara says, well, shouldn't you still be able to say, why should it be an issue of yayn nesech? Once the yid pours the wine into the vessel of the ovayd kokhavim, once the wine goes into the vessel, the airspace of the vessel, and the ovayd kokhavim is holding the vessel, so even before it hits the bottom of the vessel and becomes yayn nesech, it was already, once it goes into the airspace, the ovayd kokhavim should already technically make the kinyan, and it hasn't yet been made yayn nesech. Okay. So you should make the kinyan even when it goes to the airspace of the vessel. But it would only become yayn nesech later when it hits the bottom of the vessel. But by then, it would already be the ovayd kokhavim. So does that imply that nitzok chibur? Sheesh, these are like huge sugyas, and just like we're just running through them. However, we had nitzok the other day, right? Do we consider that when there's a stream connecting two different things, that the stream connects them, right? So in this case, you have the yid pouring the wine from the barrel or whatever into the vessel of the ovayd kokhavim, and we're saying that once it goes into the airspace of the vessel, the ovayd kokhavim owns it. But then what happens is when it hits the bottom of the vessel, it becomes yayn nesech because there's yayn nesech in there already. Let's say it becomes yayn nesech, but now there's the stream that is connecting the wine in the vessel of the ovayd kokhavim to the wine being poured from the yid, and all that wine is now all yayn nesech because it's connected to the wine at the bottom of the vessel, and therefore, even though, meaning because what just happened? We said that he's pouring it into the vessel of the ovayd kokhavim. We're saying, yeah, okay, but once it goes into the airspace, it's sure to be the kinyan, and it's only become yayn nesech once it hits the bottom. So what's the problem? Is this to imply that nitzok chibur? That the problem is that once it hits the bottom, now the whole stream, even the parts that aren't yet in the vessel, are going to become yayn nesech. Is that the problem? Shmamina nitzok chibur. Does that imply that nitzok is a chibur, that the stream is considered a connection to what, it's connecting, everything is connected. The stuff in the vessel, that's yayn nesech. The stuff that is yet to enter into the vessel is all connected and it's all yayn nesech? No. So now the Gemara says, it goes a bit deeper and says, look, we're not going to say nitzok chibur. And yes, you're right. Once the wine goes into the airspace of the vessel, the kinyan should already be able to happen. However, that would only work if the ovayd kokhavim is actually holding it, right? We're talking about kinyan meshicha, or in this case, maybe kinyan agbah, because he's holding it. But that's if he's holding it. So yes, when the wine goes into the airspace, technically the ovayd kokhavim would be able to be koneh b'meshicha, or b'agbah. However, lo tzricha demana cha'ara, but the ovayd kokhavim was not holding it. The vessel was on the ground. The vessel was on the ground. And because the vessel was on the ground, there's no kinyan meshicha or agbah. V'tiknele kelyo. Okay, but still, the fact that the wine is going into the vessel of the ovayd kokhavim, shouldn't that be enough to make a kinyan? It's going into his vessel. So does that imply that when you have a buyer, in this case the ovayd kokhavim, who's in the shop of the winemonger, and the wine is being poured into his vessel, and we're saying that he's not konit when the wine goes into his vessel, does that imply that the vessel of a buyer in the domain of the seller, the vessel of the buyer, does not make the kinyan? Because we're saying that the yid is pouring the wine into a vessel of the ovayd kokhavim, is on the floor, and therefore it's not making a kinyan. Why not? Is it because it's in the domain of the seller of the yid? No, really, I will say that the vessel of a buyer in the domain of the seller can make a kinyan. Kinyan could go into ika akeves yayn pumetes kuz de kuz noso. Well, technically, if the yid poured the wine into the vessel of the ovayd kokhavim, and the vessel of the ovayd kokhavim was on the floor of his shop, as the wine goes into the airspace of the vessel, it would belong to the ovayd kokhavim. And technically, yes, the vessel of a buyer in the domain of the seller can make a kinyan, and therefore, technically, it should belong to the ovayd kokhavim. However, there's a hitch. The hitch is that at the top of the vessel, there's some kind of something, some kind of a stopper, some kind of something that has some yayn nesech, a few drops of yayn nesech on it, such that any wine that's being poured into the vessel would have to interact with this yayn nesech. And therefore, it's just all yayn nesech. Even before it goes into the kli, it's getting all yayn nesech. The kama insich, that as the wine is going into the kli, it's getting all yayn nesech insichle. Uchman. Okay, that's the problem. But uchman, a problem according to who? To look up Shimon Gamliel. It sounds unlike Rav Shimon Gamliel, who I think we're going to learn about. I don't even know what daf I'm up to. I think we're going to learn it. I'm so behind. I think it's going to be a daf ayin hey or ayin daled. I think I'm up to ayin daled. I'm supposed to be up to ayin hey. I am so behind. Anyways, it's unlike Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. It's unlike Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, because what does Reb Shimon ben Gamliel say? Oh, Omar, yimacher kula ovayd kokhavim, chutz midmei nesech shebo. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says in Daf, I think ayin daled, that when you have some yayn nesech that falls into a pit of kosher wine, you could sell the wine, just not the value of the yayn nesech. So here also, if it was Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, we would say, okay, the wine is being poured into the vessel. The vessel has like some yayn nesech that it's going to be interacting with on the way in. But, okay, that yayn nesech should be a problem, but the rest of it, you should be allowed to sell. Yeah, well, who are we asking? This is Rav who is instructing these winemongers, and Rav's opinion is, Amar Rav says, Allah Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, chavis bechavis, avalo yayin beyayin. That Rav says that the halacha is like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel when we're talking about barrels, that if you have a whole bunch of barrels and one of them is yayn nesech, so Rav says that you could sell them except for the value of that barrel of yayn nesech. But if you have wine and there's like a few drops of wine of yayn nesech, it will make the whole thing usher, and therefore the whole thing is usher, and that's why Rav said that you have to accept payment. So therefore, okay, a lot just happened here. So Rav Ashi was saying, how do I know that there is no Kinyan meshicha by ovayd kokhavim? And he brought this anecdote of Rav requiring payment, to which a Meimar is able to respond and say, no, you can say that there is Kinyan meshicha by ovayd kokhavim, and the reason why Rav said that you have to accept payment first is because of a very specific case. He was pouring it into the vessel of the ovayd kokhavim, which was on the floor, and in such a, maybe at this point it doesn't matter if it was on the floor, but in such a way that it would have to interact with the yayn nesech, so it was all just becoming yayn nesech, therefore you have to accept payment. But technically you could argue that Kinyan meshicha works even by an ovayd kokhavim. Okay, fine. So now the Gemara has the kasha on a meimer. Meisvei of a kasha. Lokech kutos min ovayd kokhavim. We saw this taka a few weeks ago. Where did we see this? Daf Nun Gimel. Yeah, about 2.5 weeks ago or so. Somebody who was buying pieces of silver from an ovayd kokhavim, and he maybe it's like a sack full of silver, and he receives the silver, and in the sack, among the pieces of silver, is a getchke. So now what does he do? Right, the yid can't. If the yid owns the getchke, he's in big trouble. There's nothing he can do with it. He's got to throw it into the Dead Sea. So he wants to give it back to the ovayd kokhavim, so that the ovayd kokhavim can be mevatel it, etc. So where am I? So lekech grutos of the kokhavim u'matzah ben avodah kokhavim imad shelo nasan maos mashach. So if he hadn't yet paid for it, and he did a Kinyan and he did a meshicha on it, yachzir, he can simply just give it back to the ovayd kokhavim to be mevatel it. But if he had taken it after having already paid for it, well, then he has to throw it into the Dead Sea. He can't give it back. So it sounds like the payment is the important thing. If he hadn't yet paid for it, so he gives it back. If he already paid for it, malasot, nothing to do. No can do. You have to throw it into the Dead Sea. If it enters your mind, like a Maimer says, that meshicha is kona by ovayd kokhavim, well, why in the ratio can he give it back if he hasn't paid for it? So he says if he took it without paying for it, he can give it back. Wasn't he kona by meshicha? Friends, what do you say? What about Kinyan meshicha? Why can he give it back? Well, because it was a mistake. He didn't know he was buying Avodah Zarah. He thought he was buying pieces of silver. So you could say that an ovayd kokhavim can be kona b'meshicha, but the reason why he can give it back here is because he did not know that he was buying Avodah Zarah. It was a mistake. Mekachtos. He can give it back. It's not the Kinyan is not chal. Rava Reisha mekachtos sevelav mekachtos. Rava says okay. But what is the Reisha mekachtos? It was a mistake, so you can give back. But in the Seifa, it wasn't a mistake, and he has to throw it into the Dead Sea. Elam Rava rather says Rava Reisha v'Seifa mekachtos. Rather, Rava explains that both the Reisha and the Seifa is a mekachtos. Both when he had already paid for it, as well as when he hadn't yet paid for it. In both cases, it was a mistake. However, the Reisha delo yoiv zuze, but in the Reisha where he hadn't yet paid for it, so he took the silver, the sack, realized that there was Avodah Zarah in it. It was a mistake. So he gives it back. There was never any changing of money. Whereas the Reshit lo yoiv zuzeh lo meshicha avodah zarah mischazik avodah zarah doesn't look like he's selling Avodah Zarah b'yad Yisrael. Say with the yoiv zuzeh mischazik avodah zarah b'yad Yisrael. But in the Seifa, where he had already paid for it, so now he's giving it back to the ovayd kokhavim, and now he's going to ask for his money back. It looks like he's basically selling of his own Avodah Zarah to ovayd kokhavim becomes a problem. So therefore he says, no can do, you have to throw it into the Dead Sea. But in the ratio where there was no money that had exchanged hands, he just simply gives it back. But in the Seifa, where there's going to be money going back and forth, it looks like he's selling his Avodah Zarah to ovayd kokhavim, it's a problem. Okay. So we want to say that, no, there is Kinyan meshicha by ovayd kokhavim. Just that this was a mekachtos. That's why I can give it back. Says a makshisha b'eder of Rav Ashi. Toshma, come here. Hamocher yeno lo ovayd kokhavim. Oh, so this is our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, now, Chevra, as I explained our Mishnah, it sounds like our Mishnah is really talking like a Meimar saying, Kinyan meshicha. Toshma, hamocher yeno lo ovayd kokhavim. A yin is selling his wine to ovayd kokhavim. Pasak, if they agreed upon a price, ad sheloi madad, and then the ovayd kokhavim takes the wine and measures it and does a kinyan meshicha, dam of mutarim, the yid can now receive payment for the wine, even if at that point the ovayd kokhavim had already made it into yayn nesech by touching it, but since before making it to yayn nesech, he had done a kinyan meshicha. So therefore, at the time that he took ownership of it to the Kinyan meshicha, it was not yayn nesech, and at that point he had to pay for it. So what the yid is receiving payment for is the non-yayn nesech that the ovayd had been koneh b'meshicha. The ovayd meshicha b'ovayd kokhavim ain't. Where am I? Again, Tashma amocher yayn ovayd kokhavim pasuk ashlomad adam mutar b'iyamrat. And if you say meshicha b'ovayd kokhavim ain't a koneh, and if you say that meshicha b'ovayd kokhavim is not koneh, well then how would he be koneh? Through money, but he hasn't paid for it yet. Well, amai dam of mutar, and why is that money permitted? If you say that an ovayd kokhavim is not koneh b'meshicha, well then, in the scenario where they agreed upon a price, mazatam, the ovayd kokhavim takes it, and we're saying he's not koneh b'meshicha, so it's not his yet. He then makes it a yayn nesech. It's not his yet. It still belongs to the yid because he hasn't paid for it yet. When he pays for it, he's going to be paying for yayn nesech. Amai dam mutar, why is the money permitted? And for the Gemara, to actim late dinner. So the Gemara answers, well, there's talking about a scenario. The reason why, so you could say that there's no meshicha by ovayd kokhavim. The reason why the yid can accept the payment is because the ovayd kokhavim had already forwarded him a dinar. And therefore that was the payment. The payment was already received prior to the yayn nesechin. But if we're talking about where the ovayd kokhavim forwarded the dinar, what about the next part of the Mishnah? The second part of the Mishnah, Modad ad shelo pasak. If the ovayd kokhavim measured out the wine, but before they haven't yet agreed on any prices, Tama vasurin, the money is aser. V'dekadim le dinar, and if the ovayd kokhavim had already given him money, amai dama vasurin, why is the money aser? Why is the payment aser? Right, if the ovayd kokhavim already gave him the money, why is the payment? Right, why is the payment also? He had already received the money before the ovayd kokhavim yayn nesech it amarle, to which Rav Ashi would respond, right? Because the argument here is to say the kinyan is happening b'meshicha. To which Rav Ashi would respond, according to you, Amemar, that you say that it's the meshicha that is koneh. Well, you tell me, Amemar, what's the difference between the reisha and the seifa? How come in the reisha, when they had already agreed upon the price before the meshicha, all good, but if they hadn't yet agreed on the price at the time of the meshicha, well then, not good, because it's not a kinyan and he'd be receiving yayn nesech money. What's the difference? What do you have to say? Pasak sam chadaita lo pasak lo sam chadaita. That, well, when they had already agreed upon a price, well, you, a Meimar, would have to say, when they already agreed upon a price, when the ovayd kokhavim then picks up the wine, he knows what he's koned, knowing the amount that he's going to be on the line for. Or at least what the pricing is. But if he picks up the wine before knowing how much it costs, he's not sam chadaite. He's not like doing it with the intention of I'm being koned this wine, because what if the yid says, oh yeah, that's the most expensive wine in the shop? He's gonna be like, oh wait, I didn't realize that. So because he doesn't yet know what the price is, when he picks it up, he's not doing it wholeheartedly. Unlike I'm learning this Daf Ayin Aleph of meshicha Avodah Zarah with you. Daf Ayin Aleph meshicha Avodah Zarah, I am learning wholeheartedly. However, the ovayd kokhavim who doesn't know the price yet is going to pick it up not wholeheartedly, and therefore it's not a good kinyan, and therefore the didinami. Therefore, if Ashi would argue as well, afagav the kadim le dinar, even in the scenario, right? I'm saying that it's talking. So I'm saying the kinyan meshicha is not koneh. And the reason why in the reisha the money is mutter is because he had forwarded him money, and in the seifa had also forwarded him money, but that kinyan isn't a real kinyan because they hadn't yet agreed on the price, so he's not forwarding the money wholeheartedly as a kinyan. So didinami me also afagav the kadim le dinar, even though he advanced him the money. Pasak sam chadaita, once they've already agreed on a price to ovayd kokhavim as peace of mind, Lo pasak, but if they haven't yet agreed on a price, then lo samchadaiti doesn't have peace of mind. So we're still at be'etzem a standstill. A Meimar says ovayd kokhavim is kona b'meshicha. Rav Ashi says ovayd kokhavim is not kona b'meshicha. Weiter. Amar Ravina Rav Ashi says Ravina to Rav Ashi. Toshma, come in here. The Amar Reb Chiya bar Abba Amar B'Yechanan Ben Noach nerag al pachis mishvei pruta v'lo nitan leishavim. That a Ben Noach, we learned about this in Masechta Sanhedrin, a Ben Noach who steals from a Yid could be chayiv. And chayiv, when it comes to Ben Noach, chayiv means chayiv misa, chayiv hereg, head slicing. So a Ben Noach could be chayiv for stealing from a Yid even less than a shava pruta. And he won't have to return it because the Yid will be mocha on less than a shava pruta. But still, he stole. For the act of stealing, he'd be chayiv misa. The iamat meshicha b'ovayd kokhavim eino kone. And if you're going to tell me that meshicha by an ovayd kokhavim is not kone, amai nerag. Why should you be chayiv misa? If you're going to tell me, meaning, so you have a Ben Noach, he takes less than a shava pruta from a Yid. And you're telling me that meshicha b'ovayd kokhavim is not kone. So if it's not kone, it still belongs to the Yid. If it still belongs to the Yid, Taisus has interesting. Anyways, Rashi explains that if it still belongs to the Yid, then it's the Yid, so you didn't technically steal anything. So what's he being chayiv misa for? Mishum detzayre le Yisrael, because he bothered the Yid. Umay lo nitin leishavim. Okay, and what does it mean that he doesn't need to return it? Returning implies you took something, you have it, you have to return it, but you don't actually have it. The Yid has it the whole time. Deinu b'torah seishavim. Well, you don't have to go through the motions of returning it since it's less than a shava pruta, even though technically it's not returning it because you're right, it still belongs to the Yid. But if that's the case, a meseifa, the Brisa continues, if his friend comes and takes it from him, his friend is killed for it. Why would the friend be killed for it? If we're saying meshicha b'ovayd kokhavim is not konen, which means memele, when the first ovayd kokhavim, when the first Ben Noach thief stole it, it still belongs to the Yid. He's just getting killed for bothering the Yid. When his friend steals it from him, it still belongs to the Yid. So he's technically not stealing. He's also not bothering a Yid. Why should he be chayiv misa? But again, if his friend now comes and takes it from him, he's also chayiv misa. But b'shlama reishim mishum detzayre liyisrael, I understand why the first Ben Noach is going to be chayiv misa because he bothered the Yid. Elaseifa my ovayd. But what did the second guy do? If you can say Kinyan, but ovayd kokhavim is not kone b'meshicha, it still belongs to the Yid. The second guy is not stealing directly from the Yid, he's not bothering the Yid, he's bothering the first guy. Why should he be chayiv misa? Ela shmamina b'shicha b'ovayd kokhavim kone shmamina. Rather concludes the Gemara finally that meshicha by an ovayd kokhavim is kone. The meshicha by an ovayd kokhavim is kone, and therefore when the first Ben Noach steals it, he's chayiv misa for stealing, and when the second Ben Noach steals it from the first Ben Noach, he's stealing it from the first guy, he's kone b'meshicha, and he's also chayiv misa. It's settled. Meshicha is kona by an ovayd kokhavim. That was awesome, right? Right. So that was Daf Ayin Aleph, Daf 71 in Masechta Avodah Zarah. We learned about when the troops come to town. We said if it's during peacetime, barrels that are opened are osur. Barrels that are closed are mutter. If it's during wartime, all barrels are mutter because they don't have time for yayn neseching. Talking about swapping yayn nesech payment for cash. And that if Yidden did work, and if a Kohen wants to pay them with yayn nesech, they can say, hey, give us cash instead. And finally, we got into whether Kinyan meshicha is kona for an ovayd kokhavim. Machlokes, a Meimer says yes, Rav Ashi says no, and we got into a major discussion trying to resolve it one way or the other. We ended up ultimately saying, like Rav Ashi, like a Meimer, that meshicha is kona by an ovayd kokhavim. I hope you have an awesome day. I'll catch you later. Peace out.